I don't know about you, but when I watched that video, and there's a couple of them in there that just, you laugh about, but you also kind of cry about at the same time. And it's one of those things, I know for me personally, I probably haven't told my father I love him probably enough in my life. My family is very, I'm trying to find the right word. We don't express a lot of emotion in our family, let me put it that way. It's a known thing, but we don't say it and verbalize it as much as what we probably should. And I've had to catch myself with that even with my own children, making sure that I verbalize with my own children. One of the things that I absolutely love is my children are better at it than I am. I absolutely love that. And my children are better about expressing that and saying that than even I am. It's one of those things, I come from a long line of a family that just does not express things. When I look at my children and I go, okay, it's getting better. Almost one of those things where you can say, almost kind of like, there's a little bit of hope there. But as we celebrate fathers, as we remember and we honor our fathers here today, it made me start to reflect as the week goes by. And it really, for me, it was the moment I remember becoming a father. It's a funny story, the moment I remember that when I heard I was going to be a father. That's a story for another time, another day. We won't go there. My wife's chuckling. It's a good one. Let me just tell you that much. But I remember the moment I became a father. The wave of emotion that flowed over me. And I'm one of those people, I'm just kind of curious. This morning, out of our men that are here that have children, how many of you were able to actually be present at their births? Like in the room with them when they were born? Okay, I got one. There's a little bit of a difference in generations, in situations, and so forth. I was not prepared. This is a little fun. I was not prepared. They did not, when our children were born, I knew I was going to be in the room. I did not realize I was going to have to help. I thought, hey, I'm paying $12,000, $15,000 between the hospital and the nurses and the doctors and anesthesiologists and everything else like that. I'm paying like $15,000 to have this kid born. I shouldn't have to help. I'm sorry. So we're in this room, and Parker totally caught me off surprise when they sit there and they say, "Here, you need to hold a leg." Not what I was expecting that day. But I will never forget the wave of emotion and the moment I felt when I saw that child being born. And I think it's kind of funny that Lane was born, and Lane, I thought, I'm not doing that again. I enjoyed it the first time, but I'm not doing that again. So I made sure when Lane was born, Jesse's bed's right here, and they got all the monitors and IVs and everything like that. I made sure I was up in her head behind all of that stuff. So if they sat there and they said, "Here, we need you to help again," I wasn't anywhere near where I needed to be at to be able to do that. And unfortunately, Lane ended up coming so quickly, the doctor barely made it there in time. The doctor literally walked straight in, put his gown on, turned around and said, "Push." The nurse thought she was going to have to deliver Lane. And so needless to say, there wasn't enough staff in the room, and again, I got to help with Lane. But that same wave of emotion flowed over me. My life irreparably changed that day. Both those days, my life changed. And it has probably been one of the most humbling experiences of my life. Now, if you ever talk to me and my wife a lot, you're going to find that it's no secret that I'm the more emotional one between my wife and I. It's funny because I come from a family that we don't express emotions, yet I'm the most emotional one. I'm the one that I get emotional sitting there thinking about the different times in our life's kids. And it's a wave of different emotions, like the first time we took our boys to church. That's a story in itself there too. Their dedications, their baptisms, that first day of kindergarten. I remember walking my son up, our oldest, and it was always the worst for the oldest one. It was the first one I had to drop off at kindergarten. And you would have thought I was walking him to, he was walking the graduation line. I started tearing up that day, dropping him off for kindergarten. I remember walking through the halls of junior high for the first time with their schedules and letting them see their rooms. I remember the first time for high school. And very recently, the adventure of learning to teach them how to drive. That's a wave of emotion all on itself, though, too. That's a multitude of different emotions that happens during that adventure. And I will be honest, I've got 2 years, and I'm dreading that graduation walk. Because it's one of those things I know it's coming after that. See, I'm already just thinking about it. I'm going to be the one boo-hooing, going, I don't want my kids to leave, and my wife's going, see you later! Have fun at college!
All right.
But I know it's coming. I know that it's that empty room. It's that kid that I'm having to basically send off and just pray that I've done the right thing. And there's things that bring me out of everything that brings me great joy in this life, also can bring me the greatest amount of fear in this life as well. Because I know what my kids have to face out there. If anything, all through the years of youth ministry, it's made it even more real to me, the things that my kids are having to deal with and having to face in this world. Having to work through and see other parents go through things and deal with the decisions, and see these teenagers deal with the decisions that they had to. You know, I wanted my kids to be safe. But most of all, I wanted my kids to grow up to be godly men. That has been my prayers for my children to grow up to be godly men. And if I could ask if that was the one thing, that has been my prayer from the very beginning, that they would grow up to be godly men. And it was that desire, that prayer, that those of you that heard my testimony, that has actually brought us back to the church, that led me down the road of eventually accepting my call into ministry. All started with that desire for my children to grow up to be godly men. Yes, I care about their education, their careers, who they date, who they're going to marry. I care about all those things. But the facts are, those things are all meaningless next to their spiritual lives. Now, it's no secret that one of my favorite Bible characters is David. I love David. I love studying David. I love reading about him. And as we celebrate Father's Day today, I couldn't help but be drawn to some of the words of David. David, who as a father, we all know David was either extremely on or he was extremely off. He was good or he was bad. He was one extreme or the other, it seemed like. And David struggled as a father. David did some things that were, he had some serious family turmoil. I mean, let's face it, when you have some of your children that end up trying to overthrow you, that end up hurting the other children, trying to kill each other, I'm sure David was probably seriously starting to question, what did I do? Where did I go wrong? And that's not what we're here to talk about. Because the facts are, humanly possible, we can do everything that's right and our children still not end up where we want them to be at. They are their own person, they're their own being. But my prayer is that if I can do anything right, that I can instill enough of God into my children that it sticks with them the rest of their life. So that even if that turmoil does happen, they have something that's buried away in their hearts that's going to be there the rest of their lives, that they can lean on, that they can draw from. You see, we're going to be in 1 Kings chapter 2 this morning. Now this is the point where now King David, after everything that he's done, everything that David has done in his life, the giant slayer, you know, the army, I mean, he slaughtered and killed Goliath with nothing but a slingshot. He fought enemy after enemy after enemy and conquered them. He brought the nation of Israel together. He built Jerusalem. David did some incredible things in his life. And now he's on his deathbed. And here we see where he has some last words, some last instructions for his son Solomon. The one that's going to take over for him. Now, you can imagine the flood of emotion was probably going through David. Because they tell us that as you approach death, that it can invoke expression of the highest thoughts, the deepest regrets, or the most pressing concerns as you start to near that moment of your life. For David, it was a depression of great concern. And you can imagine, rightfully so, he was king. He was king over a nation. He's getting ready to hand this off to his son. But what's amazing is out of all the things that David could be saying to Solomon right now, you could probably imagine the wisdom that he could be passing off on to him. The things that he could be telling him about ruling a nation, about being the leader, how he needs to rule this and administrate this and handle all these different situations. There's so many topics that David could have been feeling concerned about passing on to Solomon. But for David, first, it was moral and spiritual growth of the kingdom. That was his first concern. Secondly was the political stability. It was not the political stability. It was not, oh, make sure that this gets done, that you pay this, that you do this certain way. That was not his number one concern. And can you just imagine this concern? David had not only raised up his own children, but he had been, to a certain degree, kind of a spiritual father to the nation of Israel. He kind of had to grow them up a little bit. And now he's faced with the fact that he's got to let it go, and he's got to leave it to another generation. I can only imagine the fear, the doubt, and the questions in his mind. But in 1 Kings chapter 2, verses 1 through 4, we see what David really does focus on. As the time of King David's death approached, he gave his charge to his son Solomon. He said, I'm going wherever one on earth must someday go. Take courage and be a man. Observe the requirements of the Lord your God and follow all his ways. Keep the decrees, commands, regulations, and laws written in the law of Moses, so that you will be successful in all you do and wherever you go. If you do this, then the Lord will keep the promise he made to me. He told me, if your descendants live as they should and follow me faithfully with all their heart and soul, one of them will always sit on the throne of Israel. See, David realized that growing morally and spiritually, developing and holy living was possible only through obedience to what had been revealed through Moses. He didn't realize that was what, it's not telling us that is what saves them. It's what helps make it possible. You see, David knew that you had to pay attention and live within the law if you wanted to grow spiritually. It's not what necessarily grows us spiritually, but let's face the facts. You can't go out and live your life according to the world and expect to grow closer to God. It does not work. When you've got the world view and you've got the heavenly view, you can't go out and expect to live all of this while at the same time growing in this world. It doesn't happen. It's apples and oranges. It does not mix together. You see, this revelation placed Solomon under the responsibility to walk in his ways. You see, obedience was the condition for experiencing a rich and full life. God-honoring and prosperous. Obedience was also the condition for the fulfillment of this promise that he's talking about. And we can sit here and go, well, what promise is he talking about? You see, this promise that David speaks about to make Solomon and all his descendants look at it from a worldly sense, and to a certain degree, and when they first looked at it, why wouldn't they? Well, as long as we're obedient, we're always going to sit on the throne. But it wasn't about it wasn't about them. You see, if we skip back just a little bit, and we look at Samuel, we find that God was not talking about Solomon or his children. He was looking even further beyond that. Someone that came from the house of David. Somebody that was of the line of David. And that would sit on the throne, not of this world, but of the next. That would sit on the throne, not of this world, but in our lives. You see, he was referring to Jesus Christ. And when we realize that, when we think that, and we reread, if your descendants live as they should, and follow me faithfully with all their heart and soul, one of them will always sit on the throne of Israel. You see, David's chief concern was that Solomon should be living a holy life. And because he's living a holy life, he's going to lead his people, he's going to lead the nation of Israel into a holy life. That's what David's concerned about. He's not concerned about the political stability of the nation. David understood probably better than anybody that if he wanted his nation to be successful, you want your nation to be safe and prosperous, that he needed to be living a holy life, and the nation needed to be living a holy life. Because let's face the facts, every time that Israel swayed from that, every time that David swayed from that, what happened? Turmoil. That's what happened every time, was turmoil. David understood the priorities. He understood what the number one priority was in things. He understood that if you live this life, if you live obedient to God, all this other stuff's going to click into place. So you can imagine at his deathbed, when he's sitting there and he's concerned about, this is my last chance to pass on the smallest bit of wisdom, to be able to know that my children and my grandchildren, my great-grandchildren, that this nation that I have helped build is going to be successful. He had to come down to one thing. And he had to tell them it's all about being obedient and about that holy life. You know, his concern was more than just for his own immediate generation. It went on and on and on. You know, we can look at all of this and we can talk about it and we can discuss it, we can analyze it. But it comes down to one simple task. And I believe this is what we have to say here, we have to look at it. I believe it's the part of the job as men to help pass down a godly heritage. That is the job of a man to be able to do, to be able to pass on that godly, that holy heritage. Now the world would argue with us and say, whoa, you're being very sexist right there. What about the women? And the women have a role, but so do the men. We're living in a world that's trying to allow women to take the man's role and the man to take the woman's role. But that's not the way God made us. God made us to live in a certain way, to take certain roles. And it's not to say that one's better than the other, and that's where we mess up at. We mess up at when we sit here and we begin to believe that this role is more important than this role. Or that it's better, that you're better than the other person. That is, I believe, is where sexism begins to take its root. Is when we begin to think that we're better. But I also believe that this isn't just our biological children, that we're responsible for this for. You see, David was concerned for the whole nation of Israel, not only his own biological children. And he had many of them. He was concerned about the whole nation of Israel. Our concern must be for everybody. And as we sit here, we realize this, we talk factor. within the world and within our culture, within the church, we start talking about Christian heritage, we start talking about reaching others, talking about reaching families, connecting them to Christ. It's been very long understood that, if you can reach the children, that's great. And there's always the possibility that through the children you might end up being able to gain contact with the parents. And then there's the belief that, well, if you can get the mother connected with Christ, you're going to end up getting the children. But it's also known that if you get the father, you're going to get the whole family. Now, there's obviously exceptions to every rule, but 99% of the time, if you can get hold of the father, and you can get that man connected in with God, and that man understand his role of what God is calling him to do, you get the entire family. That's been proven time and time and time and time again. See, the man's very important, and it has a very important role in the family and in building the kingdom. And like I said, we live in a world that says we shouldn't be preaching that. That's not equality. That's sexist. But I'm one of those people, I believe that that's biblical. But I also realize that there's times that, we have to make do with what we have. And that maybe the father, maybe the man is not an option in that role, in that situation, in that scenario. And we make do with what we have. Then, we want to honor you for what you've done. But we also want to make sure that we step up and do what we're supposed to do at the same time. Just like David, I want to make sure that I'm both an example and a teacher through the future generations. That I am for my family, that I am for my church family, for my Christian family. I want to be an example and a teacher. I want my children to grow up obedient to God, to experience the blessing of God, sitting. I want them to experience the blessings that can come from God because He sits on the throne of their hearts. We can't forget what our job is. And the facts are, it never ends. We are and always will be spiritual fathers to the younger generation. Because we're going to find that there's families where, like I said earlier, the father's not there and they need a spiritual leader in their lives. They need someone that only another man can fill that role and that position in their lives. And that falls both for women and men. Little girls and little boys both need a spiritual male in their life in some dimension. Different roles, different purposes, but they need both of them. I've got a little clip that I'm going to show you here in just a second here that many of you guys have probably seen this movie. It was life-changing for me to watch this movie. My children were young when I first got to see it. And it made me realize, and it got me excited, is what I have to say. It got me excited about who I was supposed to be and what I was supposed to be doing. But we cannot forget what our job is as spiritual men within the church.
As a law enforcement officer, I've seen firsthand the deep hurt and devastation that fatherlessness brings in a child's life. Our prisons are full of men and women who have lived recklessly after being abandoned by their fathers, wounded by the men who should have loved them the most. Many of these children now follow the same pattern of irresponsibility that their fathers did. While so many mothers have sacrificed to help their children survive, they were never intended to carry the weight alone. We thank God for them. But research is proving that a child also desperately needs a dad. There's no way around this fact. As you know, earlier this year, my family endured the tragic loss of our 9-year-old daughter, Emily. Her death forced me to realize that not only had I not taken advantage of the priceless time I had with her, but that I did not truly understand how crucial my role was as a father to her and our son Dylan. Since her passing, I've asked God to show me through His Word how to be the father that I need to be. I now believe that God desires for every father to courageously step up and do whatever it takes to be involved in the lives of his children. But more than just being there, providing for them, He's to walk with them through their young lives and be a visual representation of the character of God, their Father in heaven. The father should love his children and seek to win their hearts. He should protect them, discipline them, and teach them about God. He should model how to walk with integrity and treat others with respect. He should call out his children to become responsible men and women who live their lives for what matters in eternity. Some men will hear this and mock it or ignore it. But I tell you that as a father, you are accountable to God for the position of influence He has given you. You can't fall asleep at the wheel, only to wake up one day and realize that your job or your hobbies have no eternal value, but the souls of your children do. Some men will hear this and agree with it, but have no resolve to live it out. Instead, they will live for themselves and waste the opportunity to leave a godly legacy for the next generation. But there are some men who, regardless of the mistakes we've made in the past, regardless of what our fathers did not do for us, will give the strength of our arms and the rest of our days to loving God with all that we are, and to teach our children to do the same. And whenever possible, to love and mentor others who have no father in their lives, but who desperately need help and direction. And we are inviting any man whose heart is willing and courageous to join us in this resolution. In my home, the decision has already been made. You don't have to ask who will guide my family, because by God's grace, I will. You don't have to ask who will teach my son to follow Christ, because I will. Who will accept the responsibility of providing and protecting my family? I will. Who will ask God to break the chain of destructive patterns in my family's history? I will. Who will pray for and bless my children to boldly pursue whatever God calls them to do? I am their father. I will. I accept this responsibility, and it is my privilege to embrace it. I want the favor of God and His blessing on my home. Any good man does. So where are you, men of courage? Or are you fathers who fear the Lord? It's time to rise up and answer the call that God has given to you, and to say, I will. I will. I will.
You know, it's one of those things I sit there and look at and I go, they got, you know, the creators, the Kendrick brothers, they got this right. They got the message right. They know, they read this passage. And all the other passages of Scripture that talk about the role of a man, the role of a father. And I believe it's the responsibility of every man to be a spiritual father. Whether you're a biological father or not, it is your responsibility to be a spiritual father to the younger generation. We can say, it's easy to sit here and say, well, I can be the spiritual leader of my own home. Unfortunately, even a lot of times, it's harder to be the spiritual leader of your own home than it is to individuals that you don't know. But we are all called, all men are called to be those leaders. And I'm going to have to tell you, I've had times in my life where I have not lived up to that image. I have not lived up to what David was calling Solomon to be. He's telling the rest of us need to be. That I was not the leading example that I needed to be. And so today as we close, we're gonna sing a song here. But I want to do something, again, we kind of did this for our ladies. Because again, our mothers, our ladies have a special role in God's kingdom here on earth. But so do our men. And so this morning, I just want our men to come forward, to gather up here in the front. We're just going to have a time of prayer for our men. And I want our ladies to come up and come behind them and gather around them and support them, encourage them and say, we're here to support you to be the godly men that God has called you to be the spiritual leaders that God has called you to be. Just as you support me in being the godly woman that God has called me to be, I now support you to be the godly man. So if we would, as we wrap up here, we're going to sing through this verse. But if our men would just come forward, just gather right here in the front and the center. And all of our ladies just come and gather around them. May they work in harmony. May they work in coordination with you, with the women of our church, with the children of your church, Lord. Lord, we all have our responsibilities. Lord, we lift these men up right here, right now. These ones that are so near and dear to our hearts. Lord, we just ask that your will be done in their lives. Lord, that they live out the example that you've laid out for us. Lord, you as our good, good Father. Lord, we couldn't ask for a better example. Lord, as we struggle, as we go through this life, as we go through the turmoils, as our men face the challenges that are unique to them, Lord, protect them, keep them strong. focused on what you want. Because, Lord, we need them. You need them. Your church needs them. This world needs them, Lord. And we don't ever want them to forget that. We want them to be an example for that holy life. To teach that holy life. But to be that model and that example that younger generations know what it looks like. Not just hearing the stories, but Lord, they know what it looks like. So we just lift them up to you. Strengthen them. Be with them, Lord. Lord, we give our men to you here this morning. We trust them with you, just as you trust your church. We trust our families to them, Lord. Lord, we thank you. We thank you for setting the model and the example of what it means to be a good, good father. We couldn't do it without the model that you set for us, Lord. Lift it all up to you and give us Lord, we give them to you. Amen. You are dismissed.